I'm Sam Rodman, and I'm the Bishop of North Carolina. I've been here 2 years. Prior to coming to North Carolina, I was serving in Massachusetts, both as a diocesan staff member and then before that, 23 years in congregational ministry as rector or associate. And I love the Diocese of North Carolina. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk with you about becoming beloved community. So, the positive aspects of being involved in a church community are spiritual nurture and support from your brothers and sisters, because, St. Paul talks about building up the body, and that's primarily through the fellowship of our companions on the journey of faith. And the way of love is another. In the Episcopal Church, it's a way we talk about being on the journey together and really leaning into the traditional supports that the church gives us, not only prayer and worship, but the opportunity to turn when we lose our way and find our way back to the path with God, and also just time to go deeper in our journey of faith and discipleship through learning, through spiritual formation. But community is such a powerful force for good in the world. And the church, it lives into that with the spiritual dimension of our life of faith. And really, that's at the heart of what the journey of beloved community is about. It's being touched by other people that are on the journey with us, touched by the Spirit of God, and then also sometimes drawing on the disciplines of the life of the church as a way to strengthen us for the journey of mission. It really all points to mission, points to connecting with our neighbors. So this particular initiative, and it gets translated different ways in different parts of the church. In the Diocese of North Carolina, becoming beloved community is the overarching focus for our missional work. It really is the goal or the end. It is another way, and from my perspective, another way of talking about the kingdom of God, or what new creation looks like when it's lived out in community. And for us, the primary place that we focus that work, at least in the beginning, is around our own history regarding race and racial relationships and the need for healing and reconciliation. And this is something that was already happening in the Diocese of North Carolina when I got here. And it was something that people were really looking to take it to the next level, to go deeper with the conversation. And they were looking for leadership around that and how we could, as a community, not just our parish communities, but as a diocese, actually begin to do that work together in a more intentional way. Truth telling is at the heart of what it means to become beloved community. It begins with truth telling because, of course, if we don't know one another's stories, we can't really connect in a deeper way. And truth telling means telling what really happened. It means the unvarnished truth of what our experience was. Speaking from our own experience, whatever place we are in that story is sometimes painful. It sometimes means taking a risk. It's sometimes joyful because there are wonderful moments as well. But to hear the whole story and to not sort of ignore the painful parts is a really crucial element in becoming beloved community, because we can't get to reconciliation and healing unless we actually know the story, the full story, and experience that and can account for that in some way together. It reminds me, I think many people are familiar with, in South Africa, the truth and reconciliation process after apartheid. And to be able to tell the stories in that context of what actually happened in order for the healing to begin was essential. And the same is true here with our own history. We have to actually be able to share what really happened, even the painful parts, as the first step in the beginning of the healing process. Listening is deeply important in this work. And unless we can listen without, just shutting off our own internal noise and story, or our own perspective, and really honor the person who's speaking and listen deeply to what their journey has been and what their experience has been and what they've learned from that experience, but also what they have to teach us from their experience. Listening is so essential in building community of any kind. We know this in any relationship. The listening piece is vitally important in building trust, because if people don't feel heard, the relationship there's a crucial piece that's missing. And when people feel heard, then trust can begin to build. And that's really a key piece of becoming beloved community. I think we can best acknowledge it by not sweeping it under the rug, not trying to make it prettier than it was. It really does honor the experience of all of us when we allow the full history to be spoken, to be shared, and then to be wrestled with and ultimately understood. We have to bring some understanding, some frame of meaning to the stories that we hear. And in some cases, particularly around the work of becoming beloved community, some of the painful stories around race and the violence that's occurred and the way that society has looked the other way, these stories have to be told, received, and honored in order for the work to continue. I think truth telling is a big part of the way we heal when we talk about our past, especially the parts that have wounded us. But how do we heal? I think one of the ways we heal is when we know that our story has been heard and received by another person. There's an intimacy in that I think is connected to not only the heart of God and the way that God honors each of us, but I think it's also connected to the biblical narrative. Healing in the New Testament, healing in the encounters that people have with Jesus, is often about him listening, acknowledging, hearing, seeing them. And often the people in need of healing are people that were not being seen or not being heard by their society and their culture at the time. In the opportunity of becoming beloved community, part of the healing is to recognize that some of these stories have not been heard, some of these people have gone unrecognized. And this is an opportunity in the work we're doing to correct that and to actually honor their experience, their history, and the relationship. So in my experience, in race relationship, the way we change for the better is actually listening to stories, understanding what people have experienced, letting it touch us. I think often when we hear something painful, there is the tendency, a human tendency to try and insulate ourselves from the pain. I think that gets in the way of becoming beloved community. I think that interferes with the relationship building and the trust building. What we really need to engage in is to move closer to that pain and to understand both the source of it, particularly if in some way, shape, or form, even if we personally haven't been the source of the pain, the way that we may be identified with people who are the source of the pain. To acknowledge that and to honor the person's experience and to recognize that there's an opportunity here in the building of relationship, in the building of community, to move towards some kind of reconciliation, not without acknowledging what's happened, and certainly not sweeping under the rug the parts of the history that we might not choose to look at, but in fact choosing to hear the whole story and to recognizing that when that story is told, it begins to set us free from the way that we've behaved in the past and begins to open up the conversation about how we might act differently in the future. And there's real potential in that dimension of these conversations to bring beloved community to life. The church, in order to better create a beloved community, actually has to do two things. First, the church has to acknowledge its own history and to look at the ways in which we as an institution, as an organization, as a spiritual community, may have not lived up to our responsibility to really value the gospel intention around equality, around justice, around fairness. And the church, like any other human institution, has fallen short. We need to be able to acknowledge that. Then we need to actually, in acknowledging that, take the opportunity to say, how can we renew, repent first, and then renew our intention to behave differently in the relationship, and to really look at how the church as an organization cannot just give lip service to the values that Jesus taught, but to actually embody those values. And that's a lifelong process, but there are steps, there are pieces that can move us forward in that journey. Truth-telling being one of those, but also the listening piece is incredibly important in terms of the relationship building. And then building bridges, beginning where those threads of connection are made, to build those out and to recognize that relationships can always begin a process of renewal if we honor the person and honor their story. So respect is actually one of the values that I think we would all agree Jesus speaks about and upholds and calls us to. And in a deeper sense, and particularly in the work of beloved community, I think we need to go even deeper than respect. And I like to use the word honor one another. Honor because it invites us in a relationship to make the deeper connection and to recognize that there's something sacred in the other person, whoever they are, and whatever their journey has been. As a child of God, they have been on a holy journey, a sacred journey, and they have something to offer. They have gifts to bring and things to teach me and things to teach you. And that's the point of really the deeper connection that becoming beloved community invites us into. So respect is a great starting point, but honoring acknowledges that there's a deeper connection and a deeper understanding and a deeper sense that we not only belong to God, we belong to each other as God's children. In the church and in other communities, but particularly in my experience in the church, there's been a practice that's been introduced called sacred listening. And I love what that conveys and communicates and the invitation of that, because it reminds us that at the heart of every relationship is the invitation to listen deeply to the heart and soul and spirit of another person, and recognizing that that's sacred ground when we enter that space. And the holy listening, that sacred listening, as a part of becoming beloved community, is a great invitation because it creates the space for the truth-telling, it creates the space for the pain, it creates the space for the places of connection and for the moments where healing has occurred. It makes space for all of those and recognizes that in the messy and sometimes complicated and challenging work of becoming beloved community, there's grace. We are not in this alone. And in listening deeply to another person, we're always also hearing the whispers of the voice of God, drawing us together as brothers and sisters, as one family in the Spirit of Christ.